Oh, hey. Happy... I have no idea what day it is. It's Tuesday? Does it tell me? Oh, it's Wednesday. Who cares? Who cares at this point? We're in the dark depths of the new year and winter. And we get through as best we can. I'm sponsored by Hobnobs today, the vegan snack of choice. As I said yesterday, I have the Rona, and what has happened is I do not have an appetite. I can feel that my body's hungry, but I don't want to eat. It's weird for me because I love food. But I have managed to eat basically a whole pack of Hobnobs because they're vegan, and I've just craved having a biscuit with a cup of tea. So, you know, whatever, that's what I've been doing. Hope you've been getting through today well, maybe slightly healthier than me. Welcome to Story Time. We are reading Girl, Woman, Other, and I am loving it so far. You can jump in at any point really, because it's just a lovely little insight into these characters, into these worlds. We've been focusing on Amma, who is this theatrical type. Some polyamory going on, some queerness going on, some theatre going on. Cool people in Brixton. Like it's a fun read. So we're continuing with Amma's story, but we're going to get on to some others in a bit. Okay, this is part 4 of chapter 1. Amma walked to her house in the dark, still grateful she'd become a homeowner so late in life, at a time when she was practically homeless. First of all, Jack Staniforth died, and his son Jonathan, who'd been chomping at the bit for years at his father's simply scandalous decision not to financially capitalise on the King's Cross regeneration scheme that would one day run trains direct from London to Paris, gave the citizens of Freedomia 3 months' notice. Devastated, Amma nonetheless had to admit she'd had a spectacularly good run, as she'd never paid a single copper penny in rent in what had become one of the most expensive cities on the planet. She cried when she left her former office, with its jogging-sized dimensions and windows overlooking the trains that rolled into the station from the north of England. She couldn't afford commercial rents and wasn't eligible for subsidised housing. Amma sofa surfed until she was offered someone's spare room. She'd come full circle. Then her mother died, devoured from the inside by the ruthless, ravenous, carnivorous disease that started off with one organ before moving on to destroy the others. Amma saw it as symptomatic and symbolic of her mother's oppression. Mum never found herself, she told friends. She accepted her subservient position in the marriage and rotted from the inside. She could barely look at her father at the funeral. Not long after, he too died of heart failure in his sleep. Amma believed he'd willed it upon himself because he couldn't live without her mother, who'd propped him up since his early days in England. She surprised herself at the strength of her grief. She then regretted never telling him she loved him. He was her father, a good man. Of course she loved him. She knew that now he was gone, he was a patriarch, but her mother was right when she said, "He's of his time and culture, Amma." My father was devastated at having to flee Ghana so abruptly, she eulogised at his memorial, attended by his elderly socialist comrades. It must have been so traumatic to lose his home, his family, his friends, his culture, his first language, and to come to a country that didn't want him. Once he had children, he wanted us educated in England, and that was it. My father believed in the higher purpose of left-wing politics and actively worked to make the world a better place. She didn't tell him she'd taken her father for granted and carried her blinkered, self-righteous perspective of him from childhood through to his death, when, in fact, he'd done nothing wrong except fail to live up to her feminist expectations of him. She had been a selfish, stupid brat. Now, it was too late. He told her he loved her, every year on her birthday when her mother was alive, when he signed the card she brought and sent for him. Her successful older brothers kindly gave her the greatest share of the family home in Peckham, which paid for a substantial deposit on a small terraced house with a box garden in Railton Road, Brixton. A place to call her own. Cool. Part 5. Yaz. Yaz was born 19 years ago in a birthing pool in Amma's candlelit living room, surrounded by incense, the music of lapping waves, a doula, and midwife, Shirley and Roland, her great friend, who'd agreed to father her child when the death of her parents triggered an unprecedented and all-consuming broodiness. Luckily for her, Roland, 5 years into his partnership with Kenny, had also been thinking about fatherhood. He took Yaz every other weekend, as agreed, which Amma regretted when she found herself missing her newborn instead of feeling deliriously free from Friday afternoons to Sunday evenings. Yaz was the miracle she never thought she wanted, and having a child really did complete her, something she rarely confided because it somehow seemed anti-feminist. Yaz was going to be her countercultural experiment. She breastfed her whenever she happened to be, and didn't care who was offended at a mother's need to feed her child. She took her everywhere, strapped to her back or across her front in a sling, deposited her in the corner of rehearsal rooms or on the table at meetings. She took her on tour on trains and planes in a travel cot that looked more like a carryall, once almost sending her through the airport scanner, begging them not to arrest her over it. She created the position of 7 godmothers and 2 godfathers to ensure there'd be a supply of babysitters for when her child was no longer quite so compliant and portable. Yaz was allowed to wear exactly what she liked, so long as she wasn't endangering herself or her health. She wanted her to be self-expressed before they tried to crush her child's free spirit through the oppressive regimentation of the education system. She has a photo of her daughter walking down the street wearing a plastic Roman army breastplate over an orange tutu, white fairy wings, a pair of yellow shorts over red and white stripy leggings, a different shoe on each foot, a sandal and a welly, lipstick smudged on her lips, cheeks and forehead, a phase, and her hair tied into an assortment of bunches with miniature dolls hanging off the ends. Amma ignored the pitying or judgmental looks from passers-by and small-minded mothers at the playground or nursery. Yaz was never told off for speaking her mind, although she was told off for swearing because she needed to develop her vocabulary. Yaz, say you find Marissa unpleasant or unlikable rather than describing her as a shit-faced, smelly bottom. And although she didn't always get what she wanted, if she argued her case strongly enough, she was in with a chance. Amma wanted her daughter to be free, feminist and powerful. Later, she took her on personal development courses for children to give her the confidence and articulacy to flourish in any setting. Big mistake. Mum, Yaz said at 14 when she was pitching to go to Reading Music Festival with her friends, "It would be to the detriment of my juvenile development if you curtailed my activities at this critical stage in my journey towards becoming the independent-minded and fully self-expressed adult you expect me to be. I mean, do you really want me rebelling against your old-fashioned rules by running away from the safety of my home to live on the streets and having to resort to prostitution to survive and therefore drug addiction, crime, anorexia and abusive relationships with exploitative bastards twice my age before my early demise in a crack house?" Amma fretted the whole weekend her little girl was away. Adult men had been ogling her daughter since before puberty. There are a lot more paedophiles out there than people realise. A year later, Yaz was calling her a feminazi when she was on her way out to a party and Amma dared suggest she lower her skirt and heels and raise the scoop of her top so that at least 30% of her body mass was covered, as opposed to the 20% currently given a decency rating. Not to mention the boyfriend, glimpsed when he dropped her off in his car. As soon as Yaz was in the door, Amma was waiting in the hallway to ask her the sort of harmless question any parent would ask. Who is he and what does he do? hoping Yaz would say he was in sixth form, a relatively harmless schoolboy. Then Yaz replied with deadpan insolence, "Mum, he's a 30-year-old psychopath who abducts vulnerable women and locks them in a cellar for weeks on end while he has his wicked way with them before chopping them into pieces and sticking them in the freezer for his winter stews, before waltzing upstairs to her room, leaving a waft of wacky-backy." Nor is the child she raised to be a feminist calling herself one lately. Feminism is so herd-like, Yaz told her, to be honest. Even being a woman is passé these days. We had a non-binary activist at uni called Morgan Malenga who opened my eyes. I reckon we're all going to be non-binary in the future, neither male nor female, which are gendered performances anyway, which means your women's politics, mumsy, will become redundant. And by the way, I'm humanitarian, which is on a much higher plane than feminism. Do you even know what that is? Amma misses her daughter now she's away at university. Not the spiteful snake that slithers out of her tongue to hurt her mother, because in Yaz's world, young people are the only ones with feelings. But she misses the Yaz who stomps about the place, who rushes in as if a hurricane's just blown into her room. Where's my bag, phone, bus pass, books, ticket, head? The familiar background sounds when she's around, the click of the bathroom door when she's in it. Even though it's just the two of them in the house, a habit begun at puberty, which Amma finds affronting. The exactly 10 crunches of the peppermill over the canned tomato or mushroom soup that she prefers to Amma's lovely homemade ones. The murmur of music and radio chatter coming from her bedroom in the morning. The sight of her daughter curled up on the sofa under a duvet in the living room on Saturdays, watching television, until she's ready to go out at midnight. Amma can just about remember that she too used to go out late and return home on the morning bus. The house breathes differently when Yaz isn't there, waiting for her to return and create some noise and chaos. She hopes she comes home after university. Most of them do these days, don't they? They can't afford otherwise. Yaz can stay forever. Really. And that is that. It's not the end of the chapter. There are so many little endings, but it's not the end of the chapter. Loving the hobnobs, Ben. Yes, me too. Did you know they're vegan? So for all you veganuary peeps out there, get on it. Cup of tea, hobnob. As you can see, I'm nearing the end of my packet, which has been today's work. Having the Rona, I have lost my appetite, and I have eaten an apple and a packet of hobnobs today. It's just the way it's gone, but highly recommend. I'm loving this book, just so you know. It's not got any grammar. That's why it's all a bit crazy the way I'm reading it. It's like spoken word kind of vibes. Great as an actor. It's like really putting me through my paces. But it might be a little bit like you've got to really keep up to... Anyway, I'll try and slow down maybe. All right, we continue with Yaz, who is the daughter of Amma. Yaz sits on the seat chosen by Mum in the middle of the stalls, one of the best in the house, although she'd rather be hidden away at the back in case the play is another embarrassment. She's tied her amazingly wild, energetic, strong and voluminous afro back because people sitting behind her in venues complain they can't see the stage. When her afroed compatriots accuse people of racism or microaggressions for this very reason, Yaz asks them how they'd feel if an unruly topiary hedge blocked their view of the stage at a concert. Two members of her uni squad, the Unfuckwithables, are seated either side of her, Waris and Courtney, hard workers like her because they're all determined to get good degrees, because without it, they're stuffed. They're all stuffed anyway, they agree. When they leave uni, it's going to be with a huge debt and crazy competition for jobs, and the outrageous rental prices out there mean her generation will have to move back home forever, which will lead to even more of them despairing at the future, and what with the planet about to go to shit, with the United Kingdom soon to be disunited from Europe, which itself is hurtling down the the reactionary road and making fascism fashionable again. And it's so crazy that the disgusting permatan billionaire has set a new intellectual and moral low by being president of America. And basically it all means that the older generation has ruined everything and her generation is doomed unless they wrest intellectual control from their elders sooner rather than later. Yaz is reading English literature and plans to be a journalist with her own controversial column in a globally read newspaper because she has a lot to say and it's about time the whole world heard her. Waris from Wolverhampton, seated to her right, is reading politics and wants to become a member of parliament to represent and will go down the community activism route first, a la Barack Major role model Obama. Come back Barack. Courtney from Suffolk, seated to her left, is reading American studies because she's really into African American men and she chose her course because of the option to study in the States for her third year where she hopes to pick up a husband. The theatre is predominated by the usual greyheads, average age 100. Mum's friends and die-hard fans are dotted all over. They should be grey but are more likely to shave it off, dye it or cover it up with head wraps. She looks over at Sylvester, slumped in his seat, scruffy as hell in his tatty blue communist China overalls. His beard makes him look more like an Amish farmer than an urban hipster. Way too old for it, Sylvie. His arms are crossed and he's scowling like he really wants to not enjoy the play before it's even begun, when he notices her ogling him, puts on a smiley face and waves, probably embarrassed that she's read his mind. She waves too, putting her nice to see you face back on. He's one of her godfathers, but was demoted to the C list when he sent her the same birthday card 3 years in a row, a cheap recycled charity one at that. As for birthday presents, he stopped them when she turned 16, as if she had no need for financial support once she could legally have sex. The A-list goddies part with money, lots of it, every year on her birthday. They're the best as they really want to keep in with her as their conduit to the younger generation. A couple of goddies have disappeared altogether on account of falling out with Mum over some pointless melodrama. Mum says Sylvester should stop sniping at other people's success, hers, and that as he won't change with the times, he's been left behind. You mean the way you felt not so long ago, Mum? Ever since she landed the national gig, she's got very snooty about struggling theatre mates, as if she alone has discovered the secret to being successful. As if she hasn't spent way too many years of her life watching crap television while waiting for the phone to ring. This is the problem with having a daughter with X-ray vision. She can see through the parental bullshit. Uncle Kerwin isn't with Sylvester tonight because he believes politics is way more dramatic than anything on stage at a theatre. Brexit and Trumpquake, behold the comedy of errors of our time, being his latest mantra. As a Lambeth Labour councillor, he's usually at meetings firefighting, or as Sylvester counteracts, causing them, because he likes to drag the carpet from underneath Kerwin's political self-importance. Who needs enemies when your life partner undermines you on a regular basis? Kerwin uses antiquated expressions like right on and likes to keep it real by frequenting the dingiest pub in Brixton, where the old-timers sit around still moaning about Maggie Thatcher and the miners' strike, one of the few pubs that haven't been turned into a wine bar, gastropub or champagne bar, as Mum whinges. As if she herself wasn't part of the gentrification of Brixton years ago, as if she herself isn't a frequenter of the artsy hotspots like the Ritzy, as if she herself didn't take Yaz to one of the very champagne bars she supposedly scorns to celebrate passing her A-levels a year. As if she didn't take Yaz to one of the very champagne bars she supposedly scorns to celebrate passing her A-levels a year earlier. Just this once, Mum whispered as they entered the part of the indoor market that's now frequented by posh banker types who looked at them as they walked down the lane between bars as if they were looking at natives on their cultural safari. My God. Yet, who was it who was spotted at the Cereal Lovers Cafe in Stockwell by one of Yaz's mates not so long ago? A cafe that specialises in selling over 100 types of breakfast cereal at extortionate prices. A cafe that only those who've truly sold their souls to hipster hell would even think of venturing into. A cafe that's so outraged the locals, they keep smashing the windows in. As for Dad, you can call me Roland. No, you're my dad, Dad. He's sitting a couple of rows in front of her, wearing one of his Oswald Boateng suits. Brilliant blue on the outside, purple satin on the inside. His head is shiny, thanks to cocoa butter first thing in the morning, last thing at night. He's straight-backed, thanks to monthly Alexander technique sessions to counteract what he calls academic hunchback syndrome. Every so often he casually glances around to see who's recognised him off the telly. Dad's budget in clothes could pay her university fees for a year, the very fees he says he can't afford. It's his thing, prioritising fashion over the self-sacrifice of proper fatherhood. Hers is rummaging through his stuff in search of the large denomination banknotes he leaves in his jacket pockets in his walk-in wardrobe in the 4-storey house on Clapham Common, with its white wooden flooring, yellow walls, and original Cartier-Bresson photographs he chanced upon in a car boot sale in Wembley when he was a teenager and bought for £1 each. As he boasts to all first-time visitors when they walk past them in the entrance hallway. It's also probably fair to say she was probably too young at 13 to innocently open the drawer under his bed and come across a leather gas mask type thing with a leather dick attached where she presumed a nose should be, along with associated whips, jowls, handcuffs and other unexplainable objects. Unfortunately, once seen, never unseen, and it was a lesson for her at a young age that you never know people until you've been through their drawers. And computer history. Dad. The author of the New York Times and Sunday Times best-selling trilogy How We Lived Then 2000, How We Live Now 2008, and How We Will Live in the Future 2014. Dr. Roland Quarty, the country's first Professor of Modern Life at the University of London. Really? All of it, Dad? She asked him when he told her proudly on the phone about his latest professional number. Isn't that like a bit of a tall order? Don't you have to be an expert on something in a world that encompasses over 7 billion people and like about 200 countries and thousands of languages and cultures? Isn't that more like God's purview? Tell me, are you God now, Dad? I mean, officially. He mumbled stuff about the Internet of Things and Pokemon, terrorism and global politics, Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones, and then threw in quotes he attributed to Derrida and Heidegger, for good measure, which he always does when he can't handle a tricky situation. What about bell hooks? She shot back, quickly scrolling down the reading list for her gender, race and class module on her phone. What about Kwame Anthony Appiah, Judith Butler, Amy Césaire, Angela Davis, Simone de Beauvoir, Franz Fanon, Julia Kristeva, Audre Lorde, Edward Said, Gayatri Spivak, Gloria Steinem, V.Y. Moodim, Colonel West and the rest. Sorry, whoa, loads of people there. Dad didn't reply. He wasn't expecting this, the student outwitting the master. Grasshopper rocks. I mean, how on earth can you be a professor of modern life when your terms of reference are all male and actually all white, even when you're not, she refrained from adding. When he eventually spoke, his voice was choked. His car had arrived, not cab. He had to dash off. If true, the car equals limo and cab equals taxi, would be to chauffeur him to a television studio because he regularly pops up on the telly to have arguments with people even more arrogant than himself. He's become a media whore, Mum opines disapprovingly. He was such a great guy before he became famous and was corrupted by celebrity. He used to believe in something. Now he only believes in himself. Your father is very establishment, Yaz. That's why they lionize him. He's not an outsider like me, trying to get a foot in the door and being given crumbs, Yaz, crumbs. Funnily enough, when Mum watches him on the telly, she begrudgingly agrees with pretty much everything he says. And she can't say she's an outsider now that she's at the National. Dad did an epic sulk after Yaz's epic takedown. He couldn't have had her to stay for that weekend or the next or the next. Deadlines, deadlines, deadlines. You know how it is. The thing is, If she and her father are going to have a healthy relationship into the future, it's up to her to keep him in check, because no one else is going to do it. He surrounds himself with what Mum calls his court sycophants, the people Yaz meets at his parties, mainly famous white people off the telly who see him as an honorary one of them. She's almost got there with Mum, although it was a hard slog, especially when she was 14 or 15 and Mum was prone to hysteria when she didn't get her own way. Now she knows better than to try to control or contradict her daughter. All Yaz needs to say these days is, "Don't sass me, Mumsy," and she shuts up. Dad's on that learning curve too. He'll thank her in the end. Kenny, godfather number 2, who wisely gives her birthday checks starring 2 zeros, is sitting loyally next to Dad. Kenny's also bald and mustachioed in a 1970s way. Not good. He's a landscape gardener, and she and him get along mainly because he has no delusions about his own greatness. They'll watch X Factor together just for the sake of it, whereas Dad will pretend it's because he's going to write about its cultural significance. They go out riding their bikes very early on a Sunday morning before the city wakes up, across the common to Battersea, down the back streets to Richmond and the river, for the pure enjoyment of it, not because it's enforced exercise to stay slim, which is the only reason Dad runs marathons. Kenny did ask her to be a bit less negative towards Dad the other day, after he'd gone upstairs in a huff over a harmless comment she'd made. Yaz replied she was going through her cyclical late teenage years. "I just can't help it, Kenny. Once I come out all lovable again on the other side, I'll let you know." Kenny cracked up at that. He likes to remind her he's known her since she was a sperm among millions in Dad's test tube, and when Mum used to complain she was giving her a good kicking inside her womb. To which she quipped back that it was because she had an embryonic premonition she was going to be born into poverty. Once she's graduated and working, she's going to persuade Mum to sell her house, their house, which is now worth a fortune thanks to Mum's gentrification of Brixton. Mum can downsize to a bungalow, which will be very practical for a woman her age, probably in one of the unfashionable seaside towns where they'll be cheaper. With the money left over from the sale of the house, Yaz can buy a small flat. A 1-bedroom will do for now. Helping me onto the property ladder will be the defining act of your life, Mumsy. She didn't reply. Yaz wishes the play had already opened to 5-star universal acclaim so that she can watch it stamped with pre-approval. It matters because she'll have to deal with the aftermath if it's slagged off by the critics, and Mum will go on an emotional rampage that might last weeks about the critics sabotaging her career with their complete lack of insight into black women's lives, and how this had been her big break after over 40 years of hard graft, blah-de-blah, and how they didn't get the play because it's not about aid workers in Africa, or troubled teenage boys, or drug dealers, or African warlords, or African-American blues singers, or white people rescuing black slaves. Guess who'll have to be on the end of the phone to pick up the pieces? She's Mum's emotional caretaker. Always has been, always will be. It's the burden of being an only child, especially a girl, who will naturally be more caring. The end of... Oh yeah, that was a new chapter. Part one of the chapters. I don't know. I just said I'd stop at page 50, so here we are. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Girl, Woman, Other, and we will continue tomorrow. Same time, same place. Can I read the comments? Oh, look, I can scroll. Hello to everyone that's tuned in and has been hanging out. I'm definitely getting better, but I can tell when it's time to stop with the old Rona. It's all good practice though. I've got to do an audiobook on the 14th. Hopefully I'll have more jobs booked, but anyway, had a bit of a break with Crimbo and that, so it's nice to read, and it's nice to be back with you guys because of lockdown. I hope you're all keeping nice and busy. Wasn't today a gift? The sunshine, the crisp blue sky. I had a wonderful long walk I walked to Eton and Windsor. I walked along the river, and that blue sky today was beautiful. Definitely appreciate those things being isolated. Yes, that's it. I will see you tomorrow at 7:45. I hope you're all well, and if you're not well right now, like me, then I hope you are okay, and I hope you get better soon. I'll see you tomorrow, 7:45. Big love. Bye.